King Arthur and His Knights, compiled and arranged by Elizabeth Lodor Merchant. The Table Round. It was the time when the first question rose about the founding of a table round that was to be for love of God and men, and noble deeds the flower of all the world, and each incited each other to noble deeds. As long as Arthur's father, lived, Merlin the great wizard was always his best friend. The stories told about the magician's fairy house in the woods were quite true, and Merlin spent most of his time in his wonderful home among the pine trees, looking from one or another of the 70 windows, or passing in and out of one or another of the 60 doors. What a strange, shadowy place it was, to be sure, with wild deer feeding in the glades that surrounded it, and wild geese clanging as they flew in flocks across the sky at night. Human beings never ventured very far into this mysterious wood, but they whispered many strange tales about it to one another as they sat over their big log fires in the evenings. They named it the Enchanted Forest, or sometimes the Valley of No Return. Hunters who followed the hares over the meadows, or chased the wild boars through the tangled thickets on the edge of the woodland, always stopped short and turned their horses and their hounds about when they looked into the dark shadows of these haunted trees. Sometimes they caught glimpses of gray, dim walls and towers, and heard sounds like fairies singing, or unseen horses trampling, or invisible hounds baying through the wood. Then the real horses and hounds would begin to tremble as the hunters hurried them away. Spirits take on many forms, don't they? But no one could ever quite describe what he had seen and heard, though they were all agreed that if any rash person ventured up to the dim gray walls of Merlin's home, something dreadful would happen to him. In this hidden house, then, Merlin learned many and varied things from the fairies, because he could see and hear and speak to the invisible people of the air. He learned so many of their secrets that at last he became a real fairy king among them. One wonders if there's any real Merlin grimoires. Not only would the wild stags carry him wherever he wanted to go, but all the good fairy folk would come up out of the streams and down from the stars whenever he called them. One day, Merlin was standing under a great oak tree, thus making him a druid, right? Thus, just after the sun had set and the quiet shadows had commenced to steal through his beautiful wood, the little birds had stopped singing, and the bats were beginning to flit about. Merlin felt that something very wonderful was going to happen, something beautiful and strange, by which even the fairy folk of the enchanted forest would be greatly amazed. The evening grew darker, and presently the oak boughs above his head began to rustle and whisper as if a little wind were wafting them up and down. At the same time he heard gentle tappings inside the tree trunk, and a murmur of many voices speaking together in what to him seemed to be an unknown foreign tongue. Then, in the middle of the shadows, the branches and trunk of the oak began to give out a silver light, like the shining of a full moon. Slowly and silently the silvery light grew round about the tree. The boughs seemed to fade away, and a wonderful picture, as though it were painted on the silvery mist, appeared, the picture of an old man with a long white beard standing before a silver table, on which was set a mysterious and beautiful shining cup. Round about the table were seated many people who wore happy Eastern robes and looked very calm and happy, and by the side of the old man with the white beard stood a younger man with a silver fish in his hands. He placed the fish on the table, and all stood up. Merlin thought he heard them singing as they did so, but the music was very faint, and seemed to come from very far away. There's interesting fairy music sometimes that people encounter. Then the whole bright vision faded, the silver table and the shining cup, and the gaily dressed people disappeared, and Merlin found himself alone in the forest again, with the oak leaves whispering and rustling above his head. But he stood wondering. Behold, a little book suddenly fell from the branches close to his feet, and he fell, and as it fell, he heard a gentle voice speaking softly among the leaves of the tree. In the little book is written the story of the silver table and the shining cup that you have been allowed to see in a vision. I who speak to you am the old druid who saw them brought to the land of Westover Sea. I have been commanded to show you the vision and to give you the little book. I also have been commanded to tell you that from the wood of this oak, in whose boughs you have seen the vision, you are to carve another round table, like the silver table on which the shining cup stood. When you have carved this second round table, you are to take it to King Uther, and bid him keep it carefully in his palace until his death, for it will have a marvelous meaning and purpose for many years to come. And my vision of the sacred cups, what was it, on the 27th of the 7th month, 1 year, which was a Beltane night, that it represented a spiritual lineage that, did go overseas, and, it didn't start in my land. And anyways, the voice died away, and even Merlin, magician though he was, could not see the spirit of the old druid which had visited him in the enchanted forest and brought the little old mysterious book. But he picked up the book and took it home to his fairy house. There he lit his lamp, and sitting down among his magic volumes and crystals and strange caskets and boxes, he read the book from end to end, and in it there was the whole story of Joseph and his followers, and the church made of wood at Glastonbury, and the beautiful Christmas flowering thorn. Not only was the whole tale written down in the book, but there were also careful directions about the making of the second round table, which was to be carved from the oak in whose branches Merlin had seen the vision, and when finished, given into the care of Uther the king. Now, among grimoires tends to be some sort of backstory, but don't think that a grimoire is just some alternative religion book either. Merlin locked the book up carefully in one of his caskets, for he knew what a very, very precious possession it was. Many years afterwards, the little book fell into the hands of another good old man, who was very like the long-dead Glastonbury druid himself. It came to him just as it came to Merlin, falling from the boughs of a tree that was lit up with mysterious light, while a voice spoke softly among the rustling leaves. And so people would have told you in those days. It was through the writing in this little old book that they knew all about the silver table and the rich fisher and the hidden secrets of the Holy Grail. Meanwhile, however, Merlin kept the little book locked up and set to work to make a huge round table from the oak tree in the wood. Nobody knows exactly how he made it, but the fairy folk helped him, and he found words written in the little book that were obeyed by invisible hands, using invisible axes and saws and hammers and nails. When he had finished, he was an even greater magician than he had been when he had begun. So great, by using certain spells, he was able to lift the round table out of his house in the enchanted forest and to set it down in the very middle of a great hall of the royal castle that belonged to Uther the king. Uther was greatly amazed when he saw this beautiful round table he brought to his castle. Nobody knew how. As he gazed at it, however, he became aware that Merlin was standing by him, smiling at his astonishment. the great magician told him something of the way the mystical table had been built, but he darkly hinted in the words that the king did not wholly understand that, in another day, the table should be a symbol of the greatness of the reign of Uther's son. And so indeed it happened, for when Arthur became king, all the great knights who fought his battles gathered at the round table. Here they told the tales of the great deeds that cleared the bandits from the waste places and made safe the land. Here they that were all of one mind with him were given their task to change the old wicked order into the new. Here they renewed the vows of that great day when they sang before the king. Now, doesn't that remind you of the Bible, how Jesus is supposed to unite his purpose with God, and he uses the same words talking about his companions? And so we definitely wanted an influence. Remember Matthew 7:21. It's not about calling him a spiritual master. It's about doing the will of the one who sent him. And the Bhagavad Gita and the Quran and various other things talk about other ones who were sent. But let's see if we can... I have no idea what tone this would be sung in, but blow trumpet, for the world is white with May. Blow trumpet, the long night hath rolled away. Blow through the living world, let the king reign. Strike for the king and live. His knights have heard that God hath told the king a secret word. Fall battle axe and flash brand, let the king reign. The king will follow Christ, and we the king, in whom high God hath breathed the secret thing. Fall battle axe and clash brand, let the king reign. And certainly, I mean, the principles and stuff would be open to everybody, but sometimes people do get secret words, and not all of it is of the spirits, but we see a difference between Christ and God.